You may be seated. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Glory be to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, now and ever, into the ages of all ages, amen. Imagine you go to a dinner party, or you go to a friend's birthday, right? You could totally make that person's day with the things you say, or you could totally ruin their whole experience of the party by just leaning over and whispering one thing. Like it's your friend's party, it's their birthday, and you lean over and you say, wow, why did you wear that? It makes you look so fat. And walk away, right? You ruin their whole day, right? You'll ruin their whole experience. One sentence, like the whole birthday committee has been working on this for a month to surprise your friend, to get the cake, to do this, to do that, right? It just takes one sentence. They're going to be, you and I both know they will be thinking about that and only that for the rest of the night, and would ruin the whole day for them, right? I know most of you personally, and most of you are good people, nice people. You would never do something like that intentionally, although you could, but you wouldn't. No matter how much someone had upset you or bothered you, you wouldn't go out of your way to be malicious and to really ruin somebody's day, or ruin somebody's experience, or whatever, right? But you could. Similarly, one word, one phrase, one sentence of encouragement is sometimes all it takes to make somebody into something great. One of my favorite leadership quotes is by Wolfgang von Goethe. He was a German poet and philosopher. And he says, treat a man as you think he is, and you will limit him to be just that. But if you treat a man as he ought to be, you will make him as he ought to be. And I experienced that personally. The people who believed in me are the people who made me the person that I am today. But it's the words that we say. And the problem is that, St. James says it so beautifully. We're going to be looking at James chapter 3 for the next 4 weeks and just mulling over the things St. James says to us about the tongue. He says, even so the tongue is a little member and boasts great things. See how great a forest a little fire kindles. Your liver, the liver of an adult, is probably about somewhere between about 1.5 kilos, plus or minus 200 grams or so, okay? Your stomach, depends on the person and so on, but the stomach itself, not the abdomen, but the stomach, the organ itself, right, can stretch up to being about 1.5 liters. Usually it's much smaller than that, about 400 to 600 grams. The tongue is this big. It's the size of, it's a little bit longer than you think it is because it extends down right down to your voice box, but it's literally the size of the first 3 fingers of your hand, right? We're talking about 50, 100 grams, right? It is a little organ. But oh my goodness, can it do some damage? St. James is telling us. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. The tongue is so set among our members that it defiles the whole body and sets on fire the course of nature and is set on fire by hell. Out of the same mouth, St. James says, proceed blessing and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not to be so. And we're going to talk about that in probably the third talk about Out of the treasure of the heart, the mouth speaks. But right now, I just want to focus on the words that we say. We don't realize how powerful the words that we say are. In elementary school, right, people would make fun of you or bully you in the schoolyard. I hope that didn't happen to you, but it certainly happened to me, right? And then someone would teach you a little rhyme to make you feel better. Sticks and stones might break my bones, but words don't hurt a bit. And then we all went to therapy as adults, right? Right? Words do hurt, right? Words do matter, right? The little rhyme, was an anesthetic for the moment, but it didn't turn out to be right. It turned out to be wrong. Words do make a very big difference. And I respect everybody and your worldview and where you might come from and so on. But in the Christian and Orthodox worldview, we believe that God created us, and we believe that God created us in His image and likeness. And we believe that He created everything by speaking. God said there was nothing. The earth was without form and without void, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." So I happened to be, mulling over this informally at a university meeting, not knowing that I was standing in front of somebody who was doing their PhD in this very thing, in the transformation of the energy of sound waves into matter, right? And that was kind of like, Albert Einstein did a whole bunch of really, really amazing things, but the thing he's most credited with is atomic energy. The fact that matter and energy could be interchangeable, right? And that revolutionized the relationship as we understand it in the universe between matter and energy, with his famous, equation: E, energy, equals mc squared. M, mass of matter; c squared, the speed of light in a vacuum, right? And so it would mean that because it's the square of the speed of light, i.e. a very large number, multiplied by a very small amount of matter, would produce an enormous amount of energy. But the reason that you can hear me speaking right now, other than the sound amplification, is because the words that are coming out of my mouth are coming out of my mouth through sound waves. Those sound waves are energy. God emitted energy, and it became light, and it became matter. And out of things that were not there, God brought them to be. Now, I'm not pretending that I'm going to scientifically explain to you how creation happened. I'm just suggesting that it might even be possible that it is just by the words that God speaks that substance was formed. And we're created in His image and likeness. We're not creators. He is the only creator. We are all a creation. But if the words of God matter so much that they can create matter, how much do your words matter? How much do your words mean? Because your words and my words are also energy. They're also energy. And we're going to see in the third session that energy comes from deep within you, from your heart. From the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So the things that we say when we speak, we're emulating the behavior of our Creator, who in His goodness and for the sake of His goodness alone, we say in the liturgy, He brought us into existence out of non-existence. For the sake of His goodness alone, He brought us out of non-existence into existence. But by what? By a word. And you're made in His image. You're made in His likeness. If you are, well into your career now, how did you end up there? I bet you half of the people here, it's somebody who said something to them that landed them where they are now. Maybe not everybody, but somebody somewhere along the line gave you some advice, said something that inspired you, mentored you, coached you, cared for you, or the opposite, said something to you that was really mean or put you down, discouraged you, and you said, you know what, I don't want anything to do with that field. And you pivoted and went in a different direction, right? The words that we say, they can build somebody up or they can tear them down. The words that we say coach people, mentor people, encourage people, teach people, counsel people. The words that we say have so much power. Think about it. Think about just the power of sound for a minute. Like let's just think of one range of wavelengths of sound, ultrasound. Ultrasound is used in diagnostic imaging. It's used in construction. It's used in dental hygiene. It's used in industrial testing. It's used in cleaning jewelry. It's used in welding. It's used sonar navigation, pest control. A million things ultrasound is used for. And that is just a range of wavelengths of sound that are inaudible to the biological ear. They're inaudible to your ear and to the ear of a dog and so on. Let alone the wavelengths of sound that are audible to you and to me. You know what probably changed most people's lives isn't a loud sound, but a whisper from somebody that really mattered. But that's the potential that God has put in you and in me. Your words really matter. Something that was really transformative to me was when somebody told me, and I found it to be so incredibly true. When somebody says something mean to you, where did they come up with that? Like, did they just come up with that on the spot? Like, just right then and there, they invented that. And all that meanness came out to you? No. 90+% of people, I don't know, I just pulled that number out of nowhere, but the overwhelming majority of people have said those words to somebody before, probably 1,000 times. You know who they've said them before to? Themselves. That fills my heart with so much compassion when people are mean or rude or people say things, when people play on your insecurities, your feelings of inadequacy or this or that. These things don't come from nowhere, right? But they have so much power. And because we're not necessarily as careful as we can or we could be or we ought to be with our words, right? We oftentimes find ourselves in a pickle. We often find ourselves in a situation that we wouldn't have been in had we not said, had we not done, had we not intimated, had we not, and so on, right? And so the words that we say matter. It makes a difference. It makes a difference to the person in front of us, but it oftentimes makes a difference to us as well. In the book of Proverbs, it says, "The tongue of the wise uses knowledge rightly, but the mouth of the fool pours forth foolishness." The tongue of the wise uses knowledge rightly. There's all kinds of things that you know about yourself, about the world, about others. But what's the best use of that knowledge? What would cause that knowledge to be something which edifies, which builds up, which leaves people better off than before it was said? Early in my priesthood, I asked my spiritual father that question, when to speak and when to stay silent. There's a lot that can be said about that. But a key question to ask oneself is is, is, is the world going to be a better place for me saying what I'm saying? So I tried an experiment at work long before my priesthood. Actually, it was maybe 6 months before my priesthood. I tried an experiment. I said, you know what? I'm not going to speak unless I'm spoken to. It was an experiment in silence. I'm not going to speak unless I'm going to add something to the discussion that hasn't already been said or someone else can't say. And I will aim to be the last to speak. You never know. Someone might speak after you and have the last word. That's fine. But I will aim to be the last to speak. And I will wait 5 full seconds before speaking after someone else has spoken to see if somebody else is going to jump in. So I tried this experiment during the fast of St. Mary for 2 weeks, for 2 weeks, right? And in my past life, I was a doctor and I led a whole team, and so, we all discussed the patients, one by one, and what should we do, and this and that, and so on, right? And you'd think, if the boss stops talking, like patient care is going to go down the tubes, right? No, nothing happened, right? The patients did just fine, right? Everybody did just fine. A couple of my colleagues, though, leaned over to me somewhere along this experiment and said, John, you've become kind of quiet. Are you okay? Right? And I said, yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, everything's okay. Yeah. They're like, yeah, you're just not as, talkative as you usually are. I was like, oh, I'm trying to listen. I'm trying to learn how to listen. I came out with 2 conclusions at the end of that. One was that my contributions were not that necessary, and the world will turn just fine without me. 2 was I had a lot more peace. It was hard. It was very, very hard at first. But after I got used to all of these little tricks I was doing to keep my mouth shut, I had a lot of peace. It was a real kick in the pants, though, to realize that nobody missed me, Nothing changed, But it was humbling, and it was very, very, very useful. Similarly, at work, oftentimes, when somebody would say something foolish, right? I would quote from the book of Proverbs, not necessarily quoting chapter and verse. I think it's in chapter 17. Yeah, verse 28. It says, even the fool is thought to be wise when he keeps silent. So when one of the medical students would be chatting on and on about something useless, I would turn and look at them and I'd say, even a fool is considered wise when he keeps silent. And Winston Churchill says something along the same lines. I didn't look it up, but I should have. He says, better to keep silent and be thought a fool than to open one's mouth and remove all doubt. Better to keep one's mouth silent and be thought a fool than to open one's mouth and to remove all doubt. So how can we be a little bit more mindful? I mean, really, we all know what we need to do, right? Socrates basically says, if you want people to think about what you're going to say, make sure that you thought about it before you said it, right? My dad, when I would go to him as a teenager, with all kinds of things that people said to me that upset me or hurt my feelings or whatever, he would often say to me, if somebody says something to you that's inconsiderate, don't consider it. If somebody didn't stop to think for 5 seconds before they opened their mouth, maybe you shouldn't be wasting your time and energy thinking about it either. But none of us want to be that person. So all of us basically want to think before we speak. Which is hard. It's hard to do, right? So, what can we do to try to reel ourselves in a little bit and give ourselves just a second to think, to pray before we speak? I'll tell you, my favorite trick, and I learned this here, I learned this as being a priest in this church, I learned this through a wonderful program that we do on and off and all the time called Alpha. I learned to listen. Listen. You can't listen and talk at the same time. So just listen. Make an effort to listen to other people. And the easiest way to do that is by asking questions. Get them to do the talking. St. James says we all stumble in many ways. That's the second verse in the chapter. It gives me so much comfort to know that St. James, the Bishop of Jerusalem, the eldest and most eminent and respected amongst all of the apostles, we think it's St. Peter, but it's actually St. James, was the eldest. He was the elder amongst the apostles. He was Jesus's cousin. He was St. James says, for we all stumble in many ways. So if you mess up in your speech, you know you're in good company. You're in the company of the saints, because even the saints say we all stumble in many ways. But it would be nice if we found a way not to stumble as frequently, and maybe that would come by thinking. But if I don't have to do the talking, then I'm less likely to do the stumbling. Right? So if I ask questions of the other person and they chat away, they're more likely to make a mistake in this conversation than I am. I'm not trying to make anybody, I don't wish harm upon anyone, but I'm trying to save my bacon here, and I'm trying to keep myself from saying dumb things, from hurting people, from being thoughtless or insensitive in the things that I say and the things that I do, right? A common adage, I don't know who said it, but it's a common adage in Alpha and a common adage in leadership. We often say people are not willing to listen until they feel that they themselves have been heard. I meet people all the time who want to tell me that what I believe is wrong. So I listen to them. So what we learn in Alpha is to look and say, wow, that's very interesting. Tell me more about that. My favorite is, that's very interesting. I've never heard that before. Yeah, right. I've heard it all before, right? There's nothing new under the sun, right? But, it gets the other person, tell me more about that. And it gets the other person talking. That's very interesting. Can you give me an example? That's very interesting. Where in your life have you found that to be true? And so on. And you get the other person to talk. And while they talk, what do? You pray. You pray and you say, Lord, how can I be your voice in this conversation? How can I be your warmth, your welcome, your hospitality in this conversation? How can I receive this person as you would receive them in this conversation, right? People are oftentimes not willing to listen until they feel that they themselves have been heard. So oftentimes it's helpful to begin a relationship with somebody with listening, and a lot of listening. Another famous adage in leadership, again, nobody knows who said it, but everybody repeats it all the time, is that we oftentimes gain people's respect with our ears and lose it with our tongue, right? In situations where people are very hurt or feeling their emotions are very raw or very sensitive. Somebody's very sensitive, the likelihood that they're going to receive what I'm saying, even with the best of my intentions, in a way that is not helpful to them, is higher because they are feeling so sensitive, right? So if the likelihood of me saying something and it going wrong, going pear-shaped, is higher, that means the likelihood of me saying something actually helpful is going down. So you'll find in very painful situations of deep suffering of another person, I've learned, it's taken me years to learn, but I've learned to keep my mouth shut. Just listen. Hold somebody's hand. What do people need most in their suffering? It's not advice or even a word of encouragement. Even that is oftentimes received it's not helpful. It's not well received. People need presence. They need you to sit beside them and hold their hand in silence, right? We gain people's respect with our ears. We lose it with our tongues. Something we found very helpful. We teach this in our marriage prep, but I do this all the time. In any situation which is contentious or where I feel the other person's emotions are getting riled up, and you can sense the energy in the room, the temperature is going up, the heart rate is going up, and you can sense the other person's getting excited. You can't just listen. You have to say something sometimes. So what I'll do is I'll paraphrase back to the person what they said. So what I'm understanding you said is A, B, and C. Is that correct? Did I understand that correctly? You're offering the other person a chance to correct your understanding of things. You're offering the other person an opportunity to continue explaining and so on, and you're keeping yourself out of harm's way by not saying anything that's going to be harmful. The other thing that happens when you ask questions is that people think you're interested in what they're talking about. Now, you may be interested or you might be bored out of your brain, but they think you're interested. And here's a magical thing that Dale Carnegie says in How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? I think it's chapter 3 or chapter 4. He says, people will think you're interesting if you take interest in their interests. It sounds like a circular argument, but it's not. If you're interested in like some eclectic thing, I don't know, like nanotechnology or so, I don't know, something that I know nothing about, maybe that's not so eclectic anymore, but whatever, something that I don't know anything about, and I don't care, and I don't want to know. If I take an interest in it and ask you questions about it, you'll have an opportunity to talk about it, and you love this field, you love this topic, or you love this sport, or you love this activity, or you love this actor or actress, or you love this genre of music, or whatever, right? And like, sincerely, I couldn't care less, right? But I overcome that selfish impetus to keep saying to myself, I don't care, I don't care. No, care for a moment, genuinely care for a moment, one moment long enough to ask a question that shows genuine interest in the thing this person finds interesting. They will think you're interesting. They will enjoy the conversation. They will enjoy the experience. What's so bad about that? What's so bad about that? One of my mentors, Dr. Sharif Emile, pediatric surgeon in Montreal, is one of the people who really made me love pediatric surgery very early in med school. This guy knows a lot about everything. I remember I was on my pediatrics rotation and I had a patient who was like, collapsing on the ward with an asthma attack. And my senior I paged my senior, they didn't answer, and I bumped into Sharif in the hallway. So I told him, Sharif, I got this patient, this, that. He goes, oh, just do this, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I did that, and then my senior called me back, and like my senior was like, oh, wow, you're so smart. How did you know to do such and such, right? Like I didn't tell them because Sharif told me to, right? But anyways, I did the right thing. So later on, I asked Sharif, I'm like, dude, how do you know? Like most people know their field of expertise very well. Like you're expected to be an expert in your area of expertise. And they might know a sprinkling about other things, but you know a lot. You're certainly an expert in your area of expertise, but you know a lot about everything else. How do you manage to know a lot about everything else? Like, where do you find the time to read or to learn or whatever? He said to me advice that I've kept and done even now as a priest. He said to me, look, every now and again you get stuck in the elevator with one of those annoying, hopefully, this isn't any of you, but he says with one of those annoying, nerdy, infectious diseases persons, right? And you ask them a question, so what are you doing in your research these days? And they go on for the rest of the elevator ride about some minutia, right? And in your head, you're thinking to yourself, oh, why did I ask the question, right? Like, we could have just rode the elevator in peace and quiet, right? Don't do that, he says. Listen to what people say, and then repeat it to yourself as you're walking out of the elevator. Repeat it to yourself as you're going to your next meeting, or going to your next patient, or going to your next OR, or going to wherever you're going, right? Repeat it to yourself 2, 3, 4 times. Try to remember it, right? Eventually, if you learn something from this person and something from that person and something from this person, things that you don't know, eventually you will know, right? The second thing he told me is, as you're walking into your apartment when you get home, ask yourself, did I learn anything today? And if you didn't, read something before you have dinner. Make sure that every day you learned something. Make sure every day you're not just doing what you've always done with the knowledge you've always had. Make sure you're learning. But you see, all of this comes from asking questions. To this day, I still do what Sharif taught me. He's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful person. If you're ever in Montreal, let me know, and I'll hook you up with him and Marie. Wonderful, wonderful people. Ask questions. The second thing is silence. Oh, silence. It's attributed to St. Ephrem the Syrian, where he says that the right word spoken at the right time in the right way to the right person is like pure chosen silver, but silence is golden, right? The perfect thing said at the perfect time to the perfect person, the Desert Fathers tell us, is like pure choice silver, but silence is still better. St. Arsenius, the real paragon of silence, says, much of what I have spoken I have regretted, but of silence I have never regretted. If you're not convinced, if you think these are like hermits in the desert, sure, they can stay silent, but at work I have to speak up. Like at work I have to perform. At work I have to, forgive me, kind of like show off, like put my best foot forward. Like if I just melt into the wallpaper, right, like I'm never going to get promoted, I'm never going to get a raise, I'm never going to get, like, people need to know that I'm here, they need to know my contributions, they need to, right? If you're not convinced that silence is so golden, try it out. Try it for 2 weeks. See what happens. 2 weeks. The world will not collapse. Try it for 2 weeks and see what happens. Even a fool is thought to be wise if he keeps silent, says the book of Proverbs. The third thing, we talked about prayer while you're being silent, but another thing to pray about. Another thing to pray about is how the words which are being spoken, whether you're the one speaking them or someone else is speaking them, can be life-giving. Sometimes you're not speaking the words which are so poisonous and harmful to another person, but you're witnessing it happen right before your eyes. Pray. Pray. A prayer I say almost every time before I speak is, Lord, please let people hear what you want them to hear, and please, Lord, let them not hear what you don't want them to hear. If you don't want them to hear something, please, Lord, you go and just have your angels go and just plug their ears for a moment, let it just go over their head. If this is not going to be like therapeutic to them, if this is not going to be helpful to them, right? Please, Lord, you be the one who makes sure that your beloved receive the best. But you can pray these prayers at work. You can pray these prayers while you're being silent and seeing before you maybe, something, that's mean or wrong, right? The last thing I want to share with you, this is something also I learned from my dad, and I learned from other excellent, priests who are, really have a gift of speaking, to try to frame everything in the positive. Many times, like I need to say something, quote, unquote, negative. I need to give some constructive criticism to somebody, right? Try to find a way to say it in a positive way. If it's not possible, try to say at least 5 positive things in company of this one point of constructive criticism. Some management books say 5, some say 9, right? It's impossible to do that, on the fly at work when you're busy, unless you are always in the habit of saying kind things to people. If you're always in the habit of saying kind things to people, then you've created a positive credit, a positive social credit with that person. And then when you need to offer a word of constructive criticism, you already have a positive bank account of positivity with that person. They know that whatever, constructive criticism you're offering it because you care about the matter at hand. It's not personal. It's not me trying to strong arm you. It's not a matter of ego. I finished with this story. As I was kind of reading and researching for this, I read this story. I read this story. I thought it was so sweet. There was a little girl who was born with a genetic disorder that caused her to have no hearing at all in one ear. And this was a story from the 60s, and teachers in public schools in the U.S. at the time were every year, once a year, they would do a hearing screening test, because maybe kids aren't doing well in school because they can't hear, right? So the teachers were asked to do this screening test where the kid would walk up to the teacher's desk in classroom full of students. Students are supposed to be working on their whatever, reading, writing, doing their math, whatever they're supposed to be doing. And the teacher would tell them to plug one ear, and then the teacher would whisper in the other ear, and it was called the whisper test. And then the kid would turn around and plug the opposite ear and whisper in that ear. And this girl, it was the most humiliating moment of the year for her every year, when the teacher would do the whisper test in her bad ear. So she learned a trick. She learned to cup, instead of cover her bad ear, to cup the good ear. Even if the teacher was speaking into the bad ear, if she cupped the good ear, she'd be able to hear. So she tried to get away with, the teacher's on this side, so she tried to get away with cupping around her ear to try to amplify the sound because she can't hear anything through her bad ear. Well, her grade 3 teacher she did the whisper test. She knew which ear was the bad ear. She did the good ear first, and then she did the bad ear. And when she came and she put her bad ear there, she could see that this little girl was cupping on the other side so she could hear. So she whispered loud enough for her to hear, and she said to her, "I wish you were my little girl." That was the best year of her life. The words that you and I say either lift people up or put them down, but oh, the power they have to lift people up. Glory be to God forever and ever.